it says children choose to play sport because it's fun and friends are there. And that's not opinion, because it's not opinion. It's actually fact. 70% of youth athletes drop out of sport by the age of 13.
Welcome to Game Changers, Athlete Edition. I'm Kortney Harmon, a former Division I softball pitcher turned high-performance business coach who knows what it takes to translate athletic mindset into real-world success.
And I'm Julie Jones, a Hall of Famer and former Division I head coach with more than 20 years of experience turned mental performance coach. Together, we bridge the gap between elite athletics and lifelong achievement, helping you unlock your full potential on and off the field. This podcast is your go-to source for inspiration, motivation, amazing guests, and actionable insights to help you elevate your game.
An interesting story about, because you mentioned, what Susie said from the stands, the parent, what they did that, and that's a real thing. A very interesting story that I just would love for everybody to hear is when I was coaching baseball at the United States Naval Academy. We had this really great high school camp and this camp for 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. We called it the Navy Baseball Leadership Camp. And we had a lot of great coaches that came in. They were very skilled coaches. They had the ability to speak on the level about sport that you speak. And we also were very proactive about saying, this is the environment that we want to have. We want it to be a positive environment. We certainly want to be clear. We want to be consistent. We want to be positive. We want to be firm. But we want to make sure that they're having a great experience. So here's some no's, like there's no cursing, there's no this, there's no that, right? There's no sarcasm. We were very intentional about like our external coaches coming in and helping us create this great environment for our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. And we would take them on obstacle courses on the yard at the Naval Academy and do a lot of military things in between. And so it really became this very special camp. It was a 5-day camp. And of course, we're playing games every day and we have our stations and so on and so forth. And for days 1, 2, 3, and 4, in which there were no parents there, we were very proactive about how we respond to umpires and so on and so forth. There wasn't a hint of dissent or argument when it came to our youth athletes to the umpire. And the umpires were often our own players on the Navy baseball team or some other coaches. And it just flowed and it flowed and it flowed. On that last day, which was our tournament day and our championship day, in which all the parents could come in and they'd be in the stands and they'd watch their kids playing the games. All of a sudden, the amount of argument from youth athletes to umpires skyrocketed, because parents were in the stands doing the same thing. And all of a sudden it went from this incredibly positive environment in which kids were not distracted from what was going on in the stands, in which they were really focused on learning and growing and competing, to now all of a sudden you see this kid that you could not believe, they just slammed their bat down. But what did they hear? They heard a parent in the stands questioning a call by one of our Navy baseball players who was a coach. And that environment was one of the most unique things I've ever seen, because it really showed. And I actually had to go over to the parents and say, we have not had any of our kids argue with umpires the entire week. And we don't expect that to happen now. So we need to quiet down in the stands. And that we don't have a lot of opportunity for youth athletes to compete in a growth-oriented environment without the distraction of their parents in the stands. And I'm not advocating for parents not to come see their kids play, but I am advocating for the understanding around what development is. We really want kids to learn more and to work through things and to navigate things with hopefully some high quality coaches who are helping them do that. But that distraction or that listening to the voice in the stands or going, I wonder are they going to tell me to get my elbow up? Are they going to do that? Like they're listening for commands versus working through a scenario, which we know that working through the scenario is better for their brain than not, right? So wanted to make sure that story got out there.
Fascinating, and so much more to it. I think, yes, arguing and all those things, but it took them out of process and into outcome.
Absolutely.
Directly. They were worried, as Dr. Rob Gilbert says on his success hotline all the time, what will other people think? What will other people say? What will other people do? because without those people, they were able to be free and make a mistake and not feel judged. As soon as you put people there, that changes. And that's a great, right. And it changes the way people are willing to lead. Mm-hmm. It changes the way people are willing to help, because if someone is there expecting you to be the star, but you really know that you should be helping, that's a rock and a hard spot. Mm-hmm. And for a 13, 14, 15-year-old, those are hard decisions to make.
Without doubt. And I think that there's part of one of the poems that I wrote in Endless Teachable Moments, which I said before we got on, if this is one of those things that I would love every all parents to just think about. It's just something to think about, and it has to do with the environment. And the reason why I made this book about essay and poetry was that I know that through my experience, I felt like sport was art, and I understood the education of it, and I understood the value and what it did for me. And I'm not the only one. I know that this is speaking on behalf of a lot of athletes who say, this is my expression. I mean, you've seen this many times, and I'm sure, Julie, when Kortney played for you, like, you probably saw expressions on her face that don't exist anywhere else other than on the field, right?
Yeah,
and that's a real thing.
I love it. She spit, and she never, she's all dressed up all the time outside of it, but on the field, me too. So I don't care. People are like, you're like spitting. I'm like, we're at the field.
And so feeling like I'm speaking on behalf of all of us who know what it felt like, all the emotions of sport, I wanted to have a place, for that. And I wrote this really for parents in the environment. And it's a poem called Flourish. And it's very short, but I'll read it. And it says, a child, once us, chooses sport for two reasons. It's fun and friends are there. And this is not opinion. Along the way, an athlete discovers sport to be a great and loyal friend, a listener who provides solace, a trusted companion always there. Sport intends on great friendship with all of the arriving children. But sport, despite its great power and might, must overcome one grand obstacle: the adults who forge the environment where that friendship flourishes or perishes. And in that poem, it says, children choose to play sport because it's fun and friends are there. And that's not opinion, because it's not opinion. It's actually fact.
Right. And
it's researched. And so there's various numbers on this, but something like 70% of youth athletes drop out of sport by the age of 13, right? And you can reference different numbers on that, but it just means that there's too many kids who are dropping out of sport by the age of 13. And the research says it's because it's no longer fun. And I go, what? But really? Like, is it, that's the reason? Like, what does that actually mean? And in part of my research, I went through the process of trying to uncover, like, what does fun actually mean? And let me get to the research here. Some research on youth motivation. A 2013 literature review by the International Journal of Coaching Science concluded that children initially choose to play sport. Some studies say because fun and friends are there. This says, one, of perceived competence, known as competence motivation theory, and their natural inclination towards mastering a skill. They want to learn a skill. Fun and enjoyment. There's some that said parental motivation, learning new skills, and social interactions with friends. So you can sum that up and say, it's fun, I get to learn new things, and my friends are there. And then with 70% of kids dropping out of sport by the age of 13 because it's no longer fun, there was a study that dissected that even more by O'Sullivan. Or this was from an article that O'Sullivan wrote. But the research says, it's important to understand what fun actually means to youth sport participants. The top 6 reasons children name fun as a central inspiration for playing sport are: number 1, the feeling of trying your best; number 2, the feeling that the coach treats players with respect; number 3, getting playing time; number 4, playing well as a team; number 5, getting along with teammates; and 6, being active. Winning was 48th on the list. Playing in tournaments was 63rd. Individual training with a sport-specific coach was 66th. And so you think about what is happening that is taking away the fun of sport. And you can go down the path of, you look at all the research, right? And the research is generally going to tell you why kids begin to play sport, because it's fun and friends are there. And then they're going to talk about the importance of sports sampling at an early age. Play as many sports as you possibly can, dip your toe into the water, learn what you like, what you don't like, learn new skills, be in different environments. And then as you're sports sampling, just continue to play multiple sports up through your adolescence. And that's going to obviously go against the sports specialization trend. And, I think the research is pretty clear that sports specialization doesn't enhance long-term outcomes in sport. And it does make you more likely to have overuse injury for obvious reasons. You're having the same movement over and over again, and you're not changing those movements. But when you do in the wrong situation, like you're likely to get hurt. And so multi-sport play, just from a physical standpoint, is going to enhance motor skills in many different areas. And I was talking to my brother about that today. He said, yeah, a lot of people talk about that. And also, one of the great aspects of multi-sport play is that you are in different environments all the time. You're with different kids, maybe different age groups, different coaches, different messages. And as part of that process, you may be the very best player in sport A. You may be the very, very best basketball player on your team. And like, maybe that's your top motivation. Maybe that's what you're obsessed with as a youth sport athlete. And you may not be the best player on your baseball team. And you may be coming off the bench for your soccer team. And the ability to learn all those different things versus living in a place in which you are only playing one sport and you are toward being the best on that team for such a long period of time. We're not getting to experience a lot of other things with that. And then the research would then say that sports sampling plus being a multi-sport athlete probably gives you a better idea of what you're going to want to focus on when you get to age 13 or 14. Mm-hmm. And even with that, it doesn't say stop playing multiple sports. It just means that you have a better idea of really what you are the most skilled at, maybe what you have the most fun at, or maybe what you have the most opportunity at along the way. And there's a place in which when you sports sample and you play multi-sports, the chances of you playing sport for a longer period of time are more likely. Like, it's just a higher chance that you're going to play sport for longer periods of time as youth, high school, and maybe even, beyond. Maybe it becomes part of your, part of your lifestyle. And there's a lot of things in youth sport that make that process really hard, right? Because exclusionary sport, AAU, travel, not that there's anything, there are great travel organizations, there are great select organizations, there are great AAU organizations. But what happens, as you know, is that when kids who are more physically able at a younger age, maybe they're recruited to be a part of the exclusionary programming, the travel team, or maybe they're the most talented and they are taken away from the county league or the house league, or maybe they have the most resources, right? And they're just able to go be a part of that. What suffers is the youth, the county league, the local league, the house league, that I would say my assumption would be that, potentially more invested parents who have more talented or more physically capable youth athletes that then go the travel route, like they're going away from the county league or the house league. They're very invested. Doesn't mean that they're the best coaches, and sometimes it does. And then what happens is those that weren't as physically able at a young age, or weren't as talented, or didn't have as many resources as others, they are in the local league that has been depleted of some of the investment that was once there. Certainly what we grew up with was everybody played in that league. And all the parents were involved, or they were around, and we didn't travel all that much. And so there was a lot of investment in that community. And I believe that it lended towards kids playing for a longer period of time because of all the things that they said were fun, like learning skills and being a part of this team and getting playing time. All those things we've kind of broken with the $40 billion youth sports business industry, we've broken some things along the way that I think I don't have a solve for right now, other than to be aware that there's a place in which we can at least look to fill some of those gaps, to bring that to a place in which we do want youth athletes playing for as long as possible. And the last bit of research on that is that there is great research that says that children who score higher on the ACE test as a middle schooler. The ACE test is adverse childhood experiences, and so you score higher if you've had significant trauma in your life. Children who play youth team sports in middle school and high school have better mental health outcomes, right, than those who scored the same on the ACE test that do not. So all of this is a reason to build environments in which our kids are playing together and playing for as long as possible, and for that to be a really, really fun experience for our youth athletes.
It's fascinating to me that you list the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then you list number 66, 68, and 64, and those are wins, tournaments, and private instructors. And it's a complete inverse, because that's what people are looking for: wins, tournaments, and private instructors. And that's fine in high school if you're looking to try to go play Division I and you know that that's the track you want to take. Or I just saw something earlier that there are 1,000 softball players in the portal as of today, and I do believe it just opened today. So that is what it is. But those three in the 60s are our drivers in today's sport.
Right.
And if we're focused on wins and tournaments and private instructors, I talk a lot about the fact that we have all these private instructors, and because we don't practice as much as a team anymore, we don't know how to help.
Right.
And we don't know how to take what we've learned over here from this private instructor and then make it work with other people, because we think that our way is the only way to do it, and your way is not. I even heard a little boy they're 13 and 14. We were playing a 100-inning game, and we were putting a kid at third base, and the one kid's like, "You're putting so-and-so at third base?" You know what I mean? Like, everybody thinks they're better than everybody. That's right. The problem. My son does not think he's better than everybody, and he's not. So that works out well. And he doesn't listen to the podcast yet. But even if he did, I would be okay with him hearing that he's not the best, and that's okay. But it's concerning when we look at friends and fun. And those are the reasons that people start to play, and then they stop playing because it isn't fun, and they might still be friends, but there's tension from the outside that makes those friendships sometimes tenuous, because now we're competing with each other more. Right. It's just sad that and I'm going to go back to the whole, I'm working on my own so much, I don't know how to help. How do we help athletes that are in this? We don't practice together, but we have to go play together because we're going to tournaments. Right. And we're going to work, how do we help people learn how to help in situations where the culture that they're training in is so egocentric? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I think it's very difficult for young athletes to be able to navigate that on their own, because, to your point, they're competing for more prestigious, or at least in their mind, more prestigious spots on this prestigious travel team at a younger age. And that's not something that we necessarily had to navigate, right? We just played in the league, and we landed on teams that were in the league, and that's just what it was. And maybe we got to be a part of all-star teams, and I'll tell a story about that. This is where I think the importance of podcasts like this, right? Which is, let's not expect kids to research and to understand and to figure out all of these things on their own. We can plant seeds that hopefully they remember, like very simple seeds along the way when it comes to mindset, skill mindset development, teamwork, so on and so forth. But educating the parents. I used to, when I give, I'm a district athletic director for 17 high schools here in Chicago. And when I talk to coaches, we have about 400 coaches. I say, you have two choices in this. You can shut out the parents, or you can make them your best assistant coaches. And the way to make them your best assistant coaches, those that will advocate for their kids doing the right things and being a part of the team and being consistent, is that they understand the importance of sports. You got to give them the education. You got to tell them the importance of being there every day and the values that exist. And you got to bring those values to a very simple place for parents, because most parents, most parents don't have an educational degree in sport leadership, right? Most parents aren't experts at skill mindset, right? They all of us as parents, for me, my 3 daughters, they may not be obsessed with sport, but they may be obsessed with art. They may be obsessed with STEM. I don't know what those pathways really look like. So what am I going to do? I'm going to listen to other parents, and I'm going to just figure out the very best opportunities I can give my kids. And educating youth sport parents on this, I think, is the most important, because youth sport parents are also youth sport coaches for the most part. And if you can alleviate some of the pressure that they feel along the way, if you can just help them, even be specific with parents and say, when your youth sport athlete is involved with this, mostly playing games and not practicing very much, what's going to happen is that they're going to be in a winning and losing environment often. And that's going to really dictate how their season goes. And that's going to be very challenging for them. And it might also help them make decisions that if they're going, I really don't want to play a 50-game season this summer with my 12-year-old. I really just don't want to do that. But am I okay with my pretty talented athlete playing 12 games in the county league and us being, I want to be the one that says it's going to be okay, right? It is going to, you're not going to miss out. And the story that I've often told is at the same Navy baseball leadership camp, I had a parent that came up to me afterwards. Their 12-year-old, the parent asked me, you played Division I baseball, you played a little bit of professional baseball. My son, after this camp, he's on a team that's going to play between 44 and 54 games. And the parent said, when you were 12, how many games did you play? I said, 12. I played 12 games. And I said, and then I made the all-star team, and we went to 2 tournaments. So I think I played like maybe 17 overall. And the parent was like, wow, only 12 games. Yeah, it was 12 games. And when I got to 14, I played on a team that played like 40 games. And then obviously, as you dedicate more to it and you're a part of, higher level teams in high school, you play more games. But I think that there's a lot of research that's developing as well that's staying within some of these travel scenarios, how much development is actually taking place, right? Is there real development holistically, from a mental standpoint? Is there real development happening within this game setting and not a practice setting? And is this environment long-term? Is it beneficial? And again, I am not against these really great select travel organizations with really dedicated people who put the best experiences they possibly can. This is not saying I'm against that, but I also want people to know it's going to be okay if they choose not to.
Right. I feel like I feel like we're caught up in this. Everybody's caught up in FOMO, but it's like, oh, well, everybody's going to this travel team. I need to go out for this travel team. And they don't realize fundamentally that they're missing more instruction. I think I sent Julie a video from Derek Jeter, and it was the idea of we're missing out fundamentally because we're not practicing anymore. And I'm even a part of an organization that there's 2 10U teams, and one of them plays in 2 leagues, and my team just plays in 1. It's like we're classified as the B team, but the rate that we're excelling, I think everybody knows once we hit puberty, everything kind of levels out. Everybody catches up. You don't feel the need to have to burn your child out at 12 years old to be competitive and to keep the fun in it, because that's right there why they want to do it. And that's why they're quitting. So. And
it's also, let's call it what it is. Parental pressure is hard, right? It is really hard. And
it is.
We have, I think.
So how do we help parents break that?
Yeah. I think that, for the 3 of us here, I think it's important to note that, for the parents that are listening, not all of them are Hall of Fame Division I coaches. Not all of them played Division I softball. Not all of them played Division I baseball and basketball. So meaning that they don't know their own entire process that led to them having the ability or the talent or whatever it was that helped them get to that particular place, which was the outcome, right? And we also know that what are the percentages now? 96, 97, 98% of all youth sport participants aren't going to get a college scholarship, right? Not going to play professionally. And so the high majority of kids have a window of time to experience it in the very best way that they possibly can. And I think that, helping parents understand all of the research that exists, then in which if you can think about the values that you want to have for your family when they begin to play sport, and if you can stick with those particular values of potentially, we want this to be growth oriented, right? We want to learn great habits. We want them to be great helpers. We want them to be great teammates, and we're going to be okay with it as long as they're having fun. And we want them to play as long as they possibly can, because it is very likely that they're not going to get scholarship accolade or a professional check for this. So how can these things be something that helps them extend through life, being able to revert back to these moments that they learned along the way? And with the high percentage of kids not being able to do that, I would argue that whether they play a 12-game season or a 50-game season, or if they travel everywhere, if they don't travel everywhere, it more than likely the same talented individuals with the same physical capabilities are probably still going to make their way toward that scholarship or profession as is, right? And I think that's, I think it's important that if you weren't upset, if you're a parent that wasn't obsessed with sport growing up, but you also see the benefit of what happened, like all the things that happen with sport now and like what the outcomes can be, I wouldn't expect your kid to also be obsessed with sport if you weren't obsessed with it when you were growing up as well. There's that whole DNA thing, right?
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. We don't expect our children to be magnificent musicians if we weren't a musician, or if music wasn't a big part of our life. But we do expect our children to be magnificent athletes, whether or not we were, and because of the culture and the there's not as much excitement around music in the culture. Unfortunately, there is in our house, but then there is in the sport culture. And Jason, you talk about the things that we learn from sport. I remember almost more than 20 years ago now, I had breast cancer, and when I had just had shoulder surgery, and then I had 3 surgeries related to my breast cancer. Kortney, were you gone already by that time?
No, it was my junior. It was like my junior or senior year. I remember.
Yeah. So, but I was going to, rehab because everything was on my right side and I couldn't move my arm, and I had to, cut across my chest. It was, like this long. And I remember our trainer was doing my rehab at the Cleveland Clinic. And she said, this experience must draw on your experience as an athlete.
Sure.
And she said, because when you're an athlete, if there's one out left, they're still game to win, right?
That's right.
You think about all the lessons that we learn, that we take away from kids, because we are, chasing tournaments and wins and all these different things. And I've said so many times before, we don't play to win, because if we played, I would have quit coaching immediately, because we were not good when I first got to Cleveland State. I would have quit coaching immediately if it was all about wins. Sure, we had to win or you get fired, but and fortunately I made it out of there before that happening, but onto a quote unquote better job. But the bottom line is that when you build your values, and I love that you say that as a family, and I think that is so important to think, why is this important to us? And what is going to be our framework so that we know when we get to a tough question or a tough decision, we know what our framework is on how we're going to make that decision. We're going through that right now. My son is a above average swimmer, and I feel the pressure to have him stick with his club swimming in the summer, but I really just want him to go to our swim and tennis club and swim on that team. because it's easier, because I don't want him to get burnt out, because I don't want to sit inside all summer while he's at practice. A million reasons, but not really about me as much as about him. But I feel immense pressure on the inside, even though I know better. Immense pressure because other people are doing it.
Right. And I think that's always going to be there. And I'm sure that our parents also felt that with perhaps not having the same or as many options out there. Right. And I think that when I look at, and I think this is my experience as an educator and studying like teaching and long-term learning experiences. When my oldest daughter first got into kindergarten, I know that we're not going to know everything there is to know about parenting, about coaching, about teaching, right? And so I'm also not going to, I'm going to try not to get into the rat race that exists within big cities. It probably exists everywhere, but in big cities, like you're trying to navigate every possible thing. And I remember saying, I just want my daughter to make decisions at school that are based on a set of values that we have. I want her to understand the importance of turning her things in on time and being organized with that. And then I want her to maintain her love of reading. If I can just keep those things in check, right, I feel really good about the possibility of her. I want her to be, if she ends up having great academic ability and talent, wonderful. Like we're all lucky if that's just the case in our own lives and our children's lives. But I do want her to love learning forever. I want that natural curiosity to be there. And I think the same thing can exist within sport, which is, I really, I want my child to understand what it means to be a really good helper and a great and a positive teammate out there, and to understand the importance of practicing, right? And to really just enjoy the sport that they're in. But if you can maintain that discipline and focus as a parent, by the way, I'm not saying that's easy, especially if they have like all of a sudden there's this glimpse of like talent and ability that all of a sudden exists, and you go, I'm going to do everything I possibly can to ensure that they get every opportunity they can possibly have. And if you don't have a lot of experience as a coach or as a former athlete, it can be really hard to say no to some of those things, unless there are more podcasts like this, or people like you, or people like me that are at least trying to empower parents with not only education and data and research, but a framework for talking about endless teachable moments of sport, a framework for talking about things, a framework for approaching things that you can always just very simply come back to. And as a parent, I often said, I know I'm not going to be perfect as a parent, but how do I know I'm doing an okay job? And I would say things like, well, if I think my child feels safe and loved and empowered, if I can just mentally feel good about those three things right there, I'm not going to be great at everything, but I always want to come back to center on that and know that I'm at least getting that out of it. I think if parents can begin to develop those small, internal family core values around that they keep coming back to, that can keep them disciplined and say, we don't always have to choose this. We don't have to pay for that. We don't have to do all these things, because this is really what we're trying to get out of this. And then as they get a little bit older, empowering them to develop their own core values around their own experience with sport is something that I would think about, recommend, and I would love to hear more people talk about that. I mean, Katie Scott, who I listened to on the podcast, I think she had two of them, right? Kortney, I was telling Julie on the phone that the way that she talked about, the way her parents led and the way her parents helped her navigate that. I sent that to my oldest daughter and said, I just want you to listen to this, not only for what she's saying, but maybe relating it to, how we look at things here. Yeah. And as I was listening to that, I actually thought in the beginning of the first podcast, that she was talking about herself as a 17-year-old long before. Not that she was actually 17 talking about this. I was so impressed by that.
She's wise beyond her years.
Yes.
But she just kept coming back around to how she how she helps create an environment of positivity around others. And that's the message that, it's great to hear young athlete. I want young athletes to hear more young athletes talk about that, because young athletes might find us pretty boring, perhaps, right? But if they hear a 17-year-old talking about it in the way that we're going, wow, this is incredible. I thought that was great.
And it all leads back to what you started off with, is that no one put Katie in a leadership position on the U.S. team. Mm-hmm. She assimilated, or she sort of rose to a leadership position without probably a title, although she got some awards and those kinds of things. But it was because she was helping. And if we get one thing out of today, I think that is such an important thing to drive home, is that instead of leadership is guidance. Leadership is all those things that you said, when it talks about, teammates first, being responsible, growth and learning, growth and awareness, and all those different things. But it all literally, for young athletes, it comes down to helping. And when we're helping other people, we're also not so internally focused that we are so over analyzing and doing all these other things, which actually is, a deterrent to our performance. When we're helping, we aren't as likely to have a tantrum, or to be sarcastic, or to be distracted, right? Or to have self-pity, because it's impossible, as my friend Jim Trussell would say, it's impossible to be, he puts it somehow complaining and grateful at the same time. That's impossible to do, right? Mm-hmm. I don't know his exact words on that, but it's impossible for us to help and be a jerk at the same time, or to be counterproductive to our own performance. And we didn't once really say leadership is driving the way, or driving it down somebody's throat. It's about going out and building relationships in all reality, and then turning those into superior performance together.
Absolutely. And I think that in all reality, as parents, as youth athletes, it's every day in terms of, we're fighting almost a losing battle every single day in terms of the battle against external validation, right? Mm-hmm. And because that exists at such a high level now, that so many things are dictated by what others think, what they say, what they click, what they like, what they don't like, all these type of things. But I think the point is that we need to know that could be a losing battle continuously, but we still need to fight against it. And with parents or young coaches or coaches of young athletes, maybe my phrase is, go be the best helper that you can be, or maybe be the best energy giver you can be to others. Maybe somebody else comes up with a different term, right? But as long as that term is supporting intrinsic motivation, right? Intrinsic validation. I feel like I'm doing a good job because I worked hard and I really like doing this, right? If we can find terms that help with intrinsic motivation versus outcomes, to me, that's a battle that we have to almost take on every single day, because outcomes are everywhere. External validation is everywhere. They're like a post and a click and a like, there's an outcome to that, right? And I think that I would love to hear more of parents, how they're keeping it simple, how they're fighting against extrinsic and trying to figure out how their kids can be intrinsic for as long as possible, and really helping youth athletes develop their own little mantras around that, right? I'm safe, I'm empowered, I'm loved, I can do hard things. Leave it there, right? And so,
That's a great little bit of advice there. Mantras of, this is who we are, this is how we behave, this is what's important. It all goes back to the core values. That's great.
Well, I fully understand why you guys talked 3 hours the first time, because we're officially at time of what we had blocked to record. So I'm going to stop you guys. I cannot tell you how incredible this conversation was. And the idea of, as we develop the next level of leaders, It's not thought of as leadership. There's so many nuance and pieces, and think about foundational blocks that go into that, Jason. And you really led us through what that could look like and what we could help as parents do. This is actually the second speaker that we've talked with that talked about developing your own family values. So I love that. And I think it makes us as coaches and parents take an honest look of what we can do to help. And so, Julie, do you have anything else to end on? Because I'm not going to let you talk anymore unless you will end on something.
No, I'm just very appreciative of this conversation, because I think it gives us, when we first said we were going to talk about leadership, this is not the way that people probably thought the conversation was going to go. But everything that we talked about today is so important and pushes us back to fun and friendship at the start, and then all the things that can come from that. But it's so important in today's winning tournament individual instructions to be thinking about helping. Because when we help others, ultimately, it comes back to us tenfold. And we're going to be better for it on and off the field, no doubt. So I appreciate your time so much and your research and everything you're doing to make youth sports better and to make me better and everyone. I hope there's some challenges in this today for people to be thinking about what their values look like and how they can maintain some sort of system or a way of thinking to keep things the way that they want it, not the way that other people expect it to be.
Absolutely. And the research is going to be ongoing. The conversations are going to be ongoing. And I'm just really appreciative that this exists, because the origin of this podcast was, I think Julie told me, Kortney went on a rant on Facebook about youth sports. Julie said, let's talk about this. And essentially you did what so many of us have already talked about, which is more people need to have official conversation around this, so that this conversation spreads and that empowers more parents and more leagues and more coaches and more young athletes to understand what we're really trying to get out of sport in the long term. And so I'm just really thankful that you're here, that you're doing this, and I can't wait to see what's ahead.
Don't forget, listeners, pick up your copy of Endless Teachable Moments, an expression of the art and education of sport by Jason Aaron Ronai, Dr. Jason Aaron Ronai. And you can get that at Amazon or any place that you buy your
And we'll
books.
link it in the show notes. We'll absolutely link it in the show notes as well. Make life easy. So,
yeah.
Jason, thank you so much for your time today. You were wonderful, and you'll be back. Continue that research, and I can't wait to bring you on next year as we continue this conversation to be like, what's new? What are we missing? So,
thank you. I can't wait as well. Appreciate you both.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us on Game Changers Athlete Edition. Remember, champions aren't born. They're built through dedication, perseverance, and the right mindset. If you found value in today's episode, share it with a teammate, with a coach, or someone who could benefit from this conversation. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you get your podcast and follow us on social media for exclusive content and daily motivation. Until next time, keep pushing your limits and stay focused on becoming the game changer you're meant to be.